Hi, Jack. Good to see you.
Hi, Umesh. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. It's so good to see you, Jack. And
Perfect.
we're getting ready to kick off day 2 with you and your panel. We're looking forward to it. We're fired up. We've got many people joining in. I see from our panel over here that we've got almost close to 100 people online, and that number that meter is continuing on. So we've got everybody. We're broadcasting on 3 different channels. 2 Facebook and 1 YouTube channel. So things are primed and ready to get your panel started. So folks, we're going to get the day started with Jack Hanagriff. Jack is with the City of Houston. He is coordinator of the Regional Risk and Critical Infrastructure Program at the Mayor's Office of Public Safety and Homeland Security. Jack is a 34-year veteran with the Houston Police Department. For the last 7 years, he has been on special assignment to the Mayor's Office of Public Safety and Homeland Security. Jack and I got to work closely on Jack Voltaic 2, which was a joint cyber exercise put on by the Army Cyber Institute and the City of Houston almost 2 years ago. Now, he is a great friend and supporter of Cyber Houston and the Houston Cyber Summit. And through his generosity and the City of Houston's generosity and Houston First's generosity, they have consistently provided free space for the summit at the George R. Brown Convention Center for the in-person summits for over the past 2 years. So we are extremely grateful, Jack, for everything that you personally, the City of Houston and Houston First have done to help build the summit and support the summit and Cyber Houston. So he is a most unassuming person and is one of those individuals who just gets things done. Welcome, Jack. It's great to have you on.
Thank you, Umesh. I typically work for whoever calls me first. I'm actually up to 38 years with the Houston Police Department, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. And what we would like to do today is I have assembled a mixed group of our diverse group of subject matter experts. And we're going to kind of show you by building a scaffolding, if you will, of how we are implementing our cyber security programs throughout the not only City of Houston, but Houston and the 5-county region, which sits under our Urban Area Security Initiative. First, I'm gonna go through the list of panelists, and first you'll hear from Charity Dominguez, who is our region training coordinator. So she is a regional asset that works with multiple disciplines: emergency services, health and medical, to cyber professionals. And her role is developing and implementing training and exercise that is important. It's an important piece of our preparedness and response. And for the last 2 or 3 years, she's been really helping us bridge the gap and ensuring that our training and exercises are incorporating cybersecurity. Then you were going to hear from Theresa Blackwell, who's president and CEO of Virtuo Group. She's contracted with the city and the region to develop cybersecurity processes, programs, and further the cyber strategy for the Houston region. She's instrumental in developing and implementing cyber tools and workshops for our Houston Urban Security Initiative. Theresa with Virtuo Group has been a great find for not only the City of Houston, but for the 5-county region. I'm very protective of her and her company. I typically try to hide her as much as possible because she is such a valuable asset. Part of her team will be Greg Madden, who is the Information Security Officer of Virtuo Group. He has so many letters after his name that he's created his own alphabet. I can't keep up with all the disciplines that he incorporates. He's helping the region prepare for a cyber storm by developing and moving us into incident management and response. Umesh and I always like to say it is a cyber storm. It's just like a hurricane. You can't stop it. It's only a matter of time. You can only prepare for it, plan for it, and hopefully respond in recovery to it. So we adopted that analogy, and that's how we've been trying to apply our training and exercise. So Liz, if you would be so kind to bring in Charity Dominguez, we'll let her start her presentation. Good morning, Charity.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for attending this symposium on cybersecurity. I'll go ahead and start the presentation. So the Houston Urban Area Security Initiative is part of the Homeland Security Grant Program that was started by the Department of Homeland Security in 2003. Next slide, please. So why the City of Houston? City of Houston is among 31 other urban areas in the nation to be considered of the highest threats. That would be with the Port of Houston. We have the Chevron Marathon every year, with the exception of this year and next year because of COVID, or next year. We're becoming more of a conference destination and having a lot more visitors coming into our city. We have large sporting venues, go Astros, as well as the Texans NRG Stadium. And we have other critical infrastructure within our city. We are high density city or urban area. The Houston area is among the top 15, growing in population exponentially. Even smaller municipalities like Conroe have seen a 39.3 increase in population within the last 10 years. So who is included in this UASI region? So we have the City of Houston and our 5 surrounding counties, as well as Harris County, Montgomery County, Brazoria County, Galveston, and Fort Bend County. And how do we support communities? We have the opportunity to look at lessons learned from other terrorist attacks that have occurred within our country. We also this gives Houston insight to adequately prepare for acts of terrorism. Our whole community approach is implementing community trainings such as CERT, which is Community Emergency Response, the Community Emergency Response Team, doing community outreach from attending town halls to going to neighborhood gatherings like National Night Out. And we also coordinate with other volunteer organizations active in disasters, such as the American Red Cross and faith-based organizations. Okay, next slide. Okay, what is our integrated preparedness plan? We're looking 3 years ahead with training and exercise throughout the region. So we gather the training and exercise that we hope to be able to do, as well as being able to implement certain trainings and exercises that we are required to do annually, such as the City of Houston Evacuation Hub exercise. And like I said, we are doing a whole community approach. We offer trainings and exercises outside of our emergency or first responders. We try to incorporate our trainings and exercises to involve our American Red Cross partners, as well as other churches, faith-based organizations, working with organizations like Baker Ripley, who provide emergency shelter during the time of a disaster. We also look at our annual, or the region's annual threat and hazard identification and risk assessment, which is called THIRA. This is an assessment that we look at and improve upon every year. We have gaps in training and exercise throughout the region, as well as our plans and equipment that is provided. by UASI funds. And so we want to make sure that we are addressing and fulfilling those gaps that we see that have from our lessons learned, and also from our after action reviews, which I'll talk about in just a second. Next slide, please. Okay, so our priorities are to continue to train and test our capabilities with utilizing equipment that has been provided to us by UASI funding. We also want to reduce long-term effects utilizing our core capabilities and vulnerability within the Houston urban area. And like I said, we've already documented a lot of these gaps and want to fill them with training and exercise. We want to improve capabilities of the region through advanced incident command system courses. These are mainly for first responders and those within the city that have to respond directly to disasters. So this is, right now, we're really focusing on our health and medical professionals with having to respond to COVID. We also want to make sure that we're focusing on those disasters which are expected to hit the Houston area, such as hurricanes, flooding, and any sort of disasters, including widespread fires. And recently, in February, we had a water main break. Also, with Brazoria County having to go through that boil water notice a few months ago. And we want to make sure that we are addressing not just response to disaster, but response to any health and medical issues that arise. And so we want to provide those important trainings throughout the region in order to fill those gaps that we want to fulfill those important capabilities within the region. And we conduct an annual integrated preparedness workshop and looking at an improvement planning workshop. And this is where our work group and training and exercise throughout the region provide insight on what they want to see in future training and exercises. And so what's really great about this workshop is that we don't just focus on jurisdictional training and exercises. We also include our academic partners, such as Rice University, the University of Houston downtown and the main campus, as well as Texas Southern University and South Texas Law. What's been exciting about this year is that we have been able to incorporate private partners and our supply chain industry, such as communications, our food supply chain, and also transportation, as well as fuel and gas. And this is the first time that we've been able to work with these partners. Thanks to Jack, because he has been working with the supply chain for quite some time. And being able to incorporate their ideas, their lessons learned, and how we can better communicate with those particular partners in a time of disaster, such as evacuation orders. They really needed to know about mask orders throughout the state, and a lot of municipalities and jurisdictions had differentiating orders throughout the state. And so being able to share that information and so that they can provide the best services to their customers, but also to protect them and maintain health and safety standards. And so we look at our existing regional plans and procedures, and we have 10 major regional plans, including public information, mass fatality, and our catastrophic medical operations plan. And so we want to make sure that we are validating and looking at or going into detail or filling those gaps with our training exercise. So our regional training exercise work group consists of people from all over the region, whether they're jurisdictional, and we have a very diverse range of disciplines, from health and medical. Like I said, we have the academic side as well as private industry partners to give a really holistic approach so that we can have the best training and exercise plan throughout the region. Next slide, please. So when we're looking at preparation, like I said, we have the regional training and exercise work group that meets quarterly. We have that annual integrated preparedness plan workshop. We look at our THIRA and look at the summary of our threat and hazard information. And we do corrective actions from our previous after action reviews. Throughout the region, we create after action reviews or after action reports from either real world events or our exercises, and really to get grant credit and to be able to fulfill these requirements in order for us to continue to get money either through FEMA or state. We have to provide our after action reviews as well as an improvement plan attached to that to better become a more resilient and better community, but also to fill those gaps and really look at how our first responders can respond efficiently and effectively, what plans we need to update, and really how we can coordinate better as a community, but also as a region. We have important regional plans. Like I mentioned, we have the Emergency Public Information Plan. And so we do have a regional joint information center that works very hard to send a consistent and concise message out to our public. And when we work with as a whole community approach, we want to make sure that we are including those people and residents with disabilities or access functional needs, as well as our deaf and hard of hearing community, blind, and our limited English proficiency community, making sure that we provide public information in the top 6 languages of the Houston region. And we keep track of our improvement plans and hold our different departments and jurisdictions accountable to really work on these improvement plans and not just have them in a file somewhere and collecting dust. We want to become a more resilient region and to be able to better prepare and respond to disasters throughout the region. And we also can look for those external sources and requirements. So this is a really good way to get the lessons learned from other disasters and attacks that have happened throughout the nation, but also throughout the world. The main lessons learned and what we've really looked at, especially around our marathon, is the Boston Marathon attack. And so we really want to look at not only their lessons learned, but how incredible their response was to the attack, and how it was such a coordinated effort, not only on a local level, but also with the FBI, and how state police responded, and how it was a really big effort throughout the city and the state. Next slide, please. So our new normal with COVID, it has made it very challenging to have our exercise facilitation, as well as training and having to plan with those CDC guidelines. So in March to about June, we had to stop all in-person training and then switch to a more virtual way that we could provide exercises. And so a lot of this was a very challenging and difficult transition for some of us who were not familiar with all the technology and different platforms that were available to us. So to share a couple of regional exercises that were incredibly successful, despite my resistance to some of these and nervousness to take care or to get on these particular platforms. Our first exercise that we were able to facilitate was our City of Houston evacuation hub exercise. And so we coordinate with all departments, not only our first responders like police and fire, but also our health department, which basically they run the evacuation hub, make sure that we are prepared and registering those people who need assistance in evacuating. We also work with the Texas Division of Emergency Management, also known as TDEM, who provide some just-in-time training, but also they have equipment that we use in order to utilize the emergency tracking network. We also, like I've mentioned before, have worked with BOADs, such as the American Red Cross. And so they come into our evacuation hub to provide water and snacks to those who are waiting to board particular buses. And so we had to really look at our evacuation hub, which is in the George R. Brown, and create social distancing markers with painter's tape and masking tape, ensuring that we could provide enough social distancing for evacuees and who may be waiting in line. And since we have most hurricanes happen during really intensely hot seasons, we wanted to make sure that we could bring in as many evacuees as possible, but also having within that entry corridor proper social distancing. So we showed how with very few people, because we can't have a lot of people in what's called a full-scale exercise or an operational exercise, we had to limit the number of our actor evacuees. But with the help of the Houston Television Network, we were able to film this and show how we will do temperature checks, how we will respond to certain situations when we register people, and also how we can provide social distancing, proper PPE to our evacuees as well as our staff, and how we can maintain those CDC guidelines. And so with all these little clips and of video and showing how We were looking at our George R. Brown Convention Center. We were in Hall F this year, and so we were able to, or excuse me, Hall A. We were able to have what was called a tabletop exercise and discussion-based exercise virtually, showing these clips to participants in order to assist or show them how we'll be able to follow these CDC guidelines. And it was extremely successful. I was really pleasantly surprised that the majority of our participants stayed for the entire 3 hours. And so it was really well attended, and we were able to get some really good feedback. And also part of our after action review is how we can better our exercises in the future, and how we can really have technology-based exercises with having more virtual, and how that will look in the future. We were also able to have a series of workshops that we brought emergency managers and our supply chain or industry partners together, and to share that real-time information sharing, what some unmet needs are, and looking at our timeline of events and what are some triggers to open an evacuation hub, how will we evacuate in coastal areas, and how that will affect our supply chain partners. So with training, it has been difficult. A lot of our training includes like group activities. And so FEMA has gone particularly virtual into the end of the year. So their Emergency Management Institute, which is located in Emmitsburg, Maryland, has been pretty much closed for the majority of this year. So people who would usually attend in person, such as myself in the Master Exercise Practitioner program, have been unable to not only travel, but also to attend classes in person. And what has happened is that they have been able to do a lot of virtual training, which has given people the opportunity who may not be able to travel to Maryland or have that funding or the ability to attend the Emergency Management Institute. And so with virtual training, it's really brought us together as a nation, and also as a great networking tool as well. Recently in June, I was able to conduct my first incident command system training in person, and with the use of our Emergency Operations Center, we were able to properly socially distance all of our students as well as our instructors. We also made sure that everybody wore proper PPE. We were sanitizing, and also had hourly or bi-hourly COVID wipe downs. Next slide, please. Okay, so why are we looking at cybersecurity in training and exercise? So there has been a serious paradigm shift in terrorist attacks, and cyber is among one of the emerging threats. So we are looking at a minimum of 20% of UASI grants awards to address 4 priority or critical areas when it comes to a terrorist attack. So that would be cybersecurity, soft targets, such in targeted places, such as the shooting at the nightclub in Orlando, Florida, and any other places where we would gather and have those terrorist attacks. This also looks at information and intelligence sharing, as well as any other emerging trends. So we really need to look at our plans throughout the region and update those. And how we want to, and how we update those is, and Theresa's going to talk about it a little bit later, is having these cybersecurity seminars to help smaller jurisdictions who may not have a cybersecurity plan create one, and how larger jurisdictions such as the city of Houston or Harris County to really look and test those plans, and also utilizing a live range in order to respond to malware or other cybersecurity attacks. So this is, all of our plans need to have a clear linkage to the National Preparedness Goal, which is created by FEMA and just recently updated. And our National Preparedness Goal is to create a secure and resilient nation with capabilities areas of a whole community to prevent, protect against, mitigate, respond, and recover from all threats and hazards. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm done. Are there any questions? I think, Jack, maybe you were looking at the comments.
No, I didn't see really any, other than you did eventually tie this into cybersecurity. We're very dependent on Charity and her efforts, because cybersecurity programs and the training exercise typically were in isolated, isolated communities, and we're bringing it out regionally, and we're bringing it out and socializing this type of training, not only in the cybersecurity professionals, but we're also bringing in emergency management, law enforcement, and the other disciplines to participate, because a cyber incident is going to involve multiple disciplines. And we discovered through Jack Voltaic that, us as a region are very hospitable or very open when it's a physical threat. We have all the right mechanisms and we have all the communication pieces. However, when it was a cybersecurity incident, it was a little harder to get that cross communication going. And so these exercises have been very beneficial in opening and bridging those gaps in the communication between those disciplines. And then we also, the training and exercise is not only important to our preparedness and our response, but it's also important to our funding. So I wanted Charity to come on and kind of talk with y'all a little bit about what she does and how we're socializing cybersecurity preparedness and response throughout the region. So thank you, Charity. I did not see any chat questions.
I just saw one from Victor. So you mentioned with the recent disasters that have hit the Houston area and surrounding region, it is very important to look at our lessons learned, and with these real world events, doing particular after action reviews and looking at how we can continue to improve as a region and to become more resilient. And so it's really important. We are doing a continual COVID response after action report. We also do departmental as well as citywide after action reviews to how we responded to Hurricane Laura, tropical storm or Hurricane Beta, and other disasters that may hit the Houston area, as well as situations like water main breaks, any explosions or building collapses, and how we respond, do search and rescue, and recover from these. So thanks, Jack.
No, thank you. So to the audience, what I'm trying to do is bring us up this path, if you will. Charity talked about, how we're expanding our regional training to include cybersecurity. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about our regional cybersecurity programs, and then Theresa will come on and talk about the tools that we have available to the region. And then lastly, Greg will come in and actually give you a ground floor view of one of our cyber training workshops. He can't do the whole workshop, but he can definitely, take you to the ground floor and give you the 10-cent tour of our workshop. So thank you, Charity. And Liz, if you would bring me up to the my slide deck, please. All right. So thank you, Liz. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the Houston region cybersecurity programs. You just heard about how vast our region is and how we work with the multiple disciplines. Next slide, Liz. So dealing with critical infrastructure, we have a risk management critical infrastructure committee that falls under the Urban Area Security Initiative. And there's several committees. There's law enforcement, there's fire, there's emergency management, there's regional collaboration, there's intelligence and cybersecurity, and then there's mine is the Risk Management Critical Infrastructure Protection Committee, and it's representatives from Houston and the 5 counties. So it's a mixed group of law enforcement, IT professionals, fire department, all the emergency services and essential assets fall into these committees that have several work groups. And our goal is to develop and implement strategies related to critical infrastructure protection, but in both physical and cyber security. That was brought about when President Obama wanted to create and tie in a task force that had physical security and cybersecurity. And so I was blessed, if you will, of incorporating cybersecurity into our committee. Keep in mind, I am not a cyber professional. I am just a chef that doesn't know how to cook, but I know a lot of sous chefs that can make what I need to get it out in the region. So I have a very diverse group of subject matter experts, and you're going to hear from a couple of them later in the program to move the strategies, products, and services out throughout the region. And training is a really big part of it. And we started doing that probably in the last 3 years. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit about 2020 and 2021 and how we're cyber focused. So during this next year, we've been expanding our cyber programs throughout the 5 counties, and we're now going into the 13 counties. So now we're talking to what I call the outlying counties or the complete Houston-Galveston region. And, Houston and the 5 counties have quite a bit of large businesses and large government entities. But then as you get out into the 13 counties, little smaller jurisdictions, smaller businesses, smaller schools, so their cyber needs are going to be a little bit different. And I'm going to talk about how we looked at the 2 different regions. You got the Houston UASI, and then you got the 13 counties. We're also looking at updating our cyber tools to align with current threat trends. As you know, the threat trends are like the weather. They're constantly changing. And we're working really close to Theresa and Greg with Virtuo Group to ensure that our tools are keeping up with those trends and any practices we need to incorporate. And really, we're focusing this year on incorporating more sector-specific opportunities. And what I mean by that is, a lot of our prevention tools are very broad and almost generic to where they capture, everybody's type of cyber evaluation. So now we want to take some of our tools and align them specifically with a sector like school districts. Their risk analysis is going to be different from a hospital. So we're looking at expanding our tools to be more sector specific. Next slide, please. This is kind of a snapshot of our Houston region cybersecurity tool suite. We currently have 4 tools, which Theresa will talk about later. Cyber Control Implementation Interface, affectionately known as the CCII. I tried to change the name, but they wouldn't let me. I thought it was very long, but okay. So now we just call it the CCII, and that's really our hub. That is our core, and that aligns to the NIST framework. Then we have the mini assessment tool, which will be expanding to be more sector specific. We wanted to build a tool that was more aligned to those mom and pop businesses or those smaller jurisdictions. We have the cyber posture dashboard. Before you take a deep dive into your cyber analysis, you can go to the posture dashboard and kind of see where you're aligned. And then we have the cyber disruption and incident response tool, which we've had for several years, and we're now currently revamping. I do want to point out that under the Urban Area Security Initiative, that these tools are funded and at no cost to you. So we offer them to not only our regional partners, but we also offer them nationally. And I think last time we checked, we got participation from every state in the continental U.S. So they're very diverse tool suite, and they're at no cost to those that need them. We typically like to keep them aligned with jurisdictions and businesses. We do have some consultants that we allow access to the tools, but they have to verify that they are actually supporting a jurisdiction. They're an embedded contractor with a jurisdiction or some government entity or mandated business. So we try to keep our tools at no cost, and we want them out into the jurisdictions and the businesses that need them. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our focused initiatives and how we're going to apply not only the mini assessments, it'll be more focused on sector specific. So the mini assessment tool, which Theresa will go into more detail, is we wanted to take this tool and develop and host a flexible cybersecurity assessment tool that can be modified at the local administrative level. So as we had some of these other sectors from school districts, hospitals, look at these tools, they would say, you know, these are great, but it doesn't really align to what I need. So working with Theresa and starting in 2021, we're in the planning phase now. Starting in 2021, we're going to be re-engineering the mini assessment tool to be more sector specific. We're planning on school risk assessments now. And then in 2021, we have to develop a voting site assessment capability that incorporates both physical security evaluation and cybersecurity evaluation. And I know 2021 is after the election, but I guess it's better late than never when you come to DHS. But they are mandating that we come up with that all urban area security initiatives that get funding, that they come up with some type of cyber risk assessment for voting sites. Then we also want to look at the regional hospitals. As we go out into the 13 counties, you have smaller healthcare facilities that may need help in some type of cybersecurity assessment. As we're working in those outlying counties, a lot of the government entities or even businesses maybe have one person that handles all their cyber or IT needs, or they contract it out. So we're trying to develop tools and services to help those smaller jurisdictions and businesses. Next slide, please. So as Charity alluded to, we held some cyber seminars. We started this after Jack Voltaic. As I said earlier, we did and Umesh kind of talked about it. We did a huge program with the Army Cyber Institute. And the goal was, could the city of Houston realize that they were under a multi-sector cyber attack? In other words, school districts were being attacked, healthcare facilities were being attacked, as well as the city. And what we discovered was probably not, because there were so many silos in existence back then that they weren't really talking to each other in the cyber community. So we used Jack Voltaic to kind of bridge that gap and getting cyber professionals and operational personnel talking to each other. We found that internally, the operations people weren't talking to their IT professionals. They didn't even know why they lost a particular service in their business. It quit working. Typically everybody pays attention when their email goes down. That's when everybody really notices something's going on. And then depending on where you are, if you see the frequency of these interruptions, do you even know it's a cyber attack? You just think, oh, there it goes again. It's gone down. And we've actually seen some entities where they don't even start looking at a possibility of a cyber attack until 2 to 3 systems start going down. They think the first 2 interferences or interruptions is just something going on in the network, and they don't even start looking at a possible attack. So we discovered these issues or disconnects during Jack Voltaic, and we determined that holding cyber seminars, workshops, training annually is a good way to bring everybody not only together, but also bridging the gap between the different disciplines. You got emergency services, and you got operations, and you got IT personnel, and they need to be at the table together. So we do a seminar every year. This year, we were able to do 3 for the Urban Area Security Initiative. And then next year, we're going to do 3 for the Houston Galveston region. Next slide, please. Under the Houston Urban Area Security Initiative, we conducted 3 cyber training seminars focusing on attack trends or needs for the region. So I gathered up all the subject matter experts from Houston and the 5 counties, both operational and IT professionals. We got around the table with Charity, and we started kind of planning, what do we need in our training and our exercise. And we were planning this, and then COVID hit. COVID hit, and we go, okay, now we can't put everybody in a room. Typically, we will put everybody in the Houston Emergency Operations Center. It holds about 80 people. We had 150 in there for Jack Voltaic. We'll never do that again. But it can seat comfortably about 80 people. And we can actually activate the Emergency Operations Center and simulate an event occurring in the region, and make it appear that you're engaged in an actual operation, and then inject cyber scenarios into the operation. And now you have operations, emergency management, emergency services, and IT professionals around the table for their respective jurisdictions, trying to solve or resolve the scenario. And then at each table is going to be multiple businesses, jurisdictions, all in this Emergency Operations Center. So it turns into a regional exercise, if you will. So not only are they solving internal issues related to the cyber scenario, other jurisdictions that are across the table are realizing they're under the same threat, or they're learning from each other and sharing ideas, and we're starting the communication. One of the major benefits that we got from these annual trainings is we created a trusted partnership. So now these cities and counties and businesses are talking to each other, and they're also talking to me. And as a result of one of our trainings, I had a major business and a city approach me later on in the year and told me that they were under an attack and needed help. And we were able to get them the help that they needed. But it was because of that trust, they knew to reach out to me and find that type of help, because sometimes they don't know who to reach out to. In the UASI training, we incorporate both briefing and hands-on keyboard. So they will get a 2-hour briefing on whatever the topic is. They will also get, every one of our training has familiarization with the tools. We always give them a briefing on the tools. And then they start getting the briefing on whatever the topic is. And this year, the topic was cyber reconnaissance. We had network security and architecture, and we had malware analysis. So we had emergency management, we had IT professionals from information security officers to CISOs to CTOs sitting in this training virtually together with the instructor, going through these briefings. Then the instructor took them on our cyber range. We contracted with a company and got access to a virtual cyber network. And what we did different this time is this was 2 hours of instructor-led training, and it aligned with the briefing. So whatever the topic was they were discussing in the briefing, the instructor took them to the cyber range, and then through injects and scenario-based activities at them that aligned with the appropriate briefing. After the course was that briefing or that training was concluded, each participant was given 20 hours of self-guided activity on the cyber range. So they were given 20 hours of access on the cyber range. And Theresa can probably, or Greg will talk about a little more of what the cyber range is. But it has videos, it has training scenarios, but it also has a lot of hands-on activities that they can develop their skills, learn that they didn't have the skills that they needed, and just become familiar with types of trends that are occurring out on these networks. Next slide, please. As we move into the Houston-Galveston region in 2021, again, these are smaller counties, smaller jurisdictions. It still incorporates Houston and the 5 counties, but the goal is to work with some of these smaller jurisdictions that don't have access to this type of training or even awareness of some of this type of capabilities. So the first thing we did was, and we developed a planning group that is a little bit different from the planning group that we did with the Urban Area Security Initiative. I incorporated some members from smaller school districts. I asked Umesh to be part of this planning group because he has a very diverse vision and works with multiple clients from large and small throughout the counties. I asked Mary Dickerson to come in. These are names y'all are familiar with. Also asked our SETRAC, which is our Southeast Texas Regional Advisory Council. That's our hospital districts. They deal with 29 counties. So you can bet that they're in contact with some of these smaller healthcare facilities. I had them come in. So I brought in this mixed group of people that may have a good lens on kind of a smaller business or smaller jurisdiction capabilities or needs. So together we created a survey to send out to the regional partners so we could identify their training needs. We wanted to focus on the small jurisdictions and small business application, and we want to develop awareness from employee to executive, because it's very important to get your executives involved, because they need to understand that cybersecurity is just beyond emails. There's or antivirus software. There's a lot involved in their networks, and they need to understand the risk of their networks and how that not only does that affect their brand, but could affect their bottom dollar. Cybersecurity is very important to their business model. So in that in mind, in 2021, we're going to hold an executive briefing. We're probably going to do like 3 separate briefings around the region. And the executive briefing, they're going to get information on cyber personnel hiring practices. Why you should have, what size business should have cyber personnel, and then what are some of the hiring practices. Well, we definitely need to be talking about managing third-party risk in the supply chain. Where is that business getting their products and services, and how is their risk posture? How is their cyber risk posture? They need to be looking at that. And then, of course, we're going to review of the UASI cyber tools, because this is a very robust set of tools, and they're available at no cost. So why wouldn't they want to look at these if they need them, and don't have access to other types of tools? Then we're going to hold 3 training sessions for IT professionals. Again, they will get the CCI suite review. And then we're going to look at possibly cybersecurity incident response management, which is Greg's going to show you a little snapshot of that later. And then we want to talk about legal policies review. You know, you heard earlier from Charity that planning, policies, and processes are very important to your preparedness, response, and recovery from any type of disaster, whether it be natural, man-made, cyber, however you want to slice it. You know, these plans are very important, and policies are also important, because as we all know, the weakest link is that person that clicks that hyperlink and lets an attacker into their cyber network. There's always typically a physical transaction with most of these cyber attacks. So we definitely, and policies are the first wave of, or first line of defense in a cyber attack. And then we're either going to hold a tabletop exercise or incorporate a cyber range train, depending on what the skill level of the smaller jurisdictions are. So next up is Theresa Blackwell, who's president of Virtuo Group, and she's both a city contractor and a regional contractor. She works very closely with me and the regional partners, and she's going to talk to you a little bit about some of our tools and how they can benefit both public and private entities. Good morning, Theresa. Glad you made it.
Hey, good morning. How are you? Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you. I turn it over to you.
Okay, great. So I'm presenting a slide deck. I'm shortening it up a bit because you went through quite a bit of it, so I'm going to try to be very efficient here. Can you guys see my deck? Because I can't tell one way or the other. I'm going to take. All right, that's great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a little bit about the tools, and then I'll talk a little bit about the workshops that Jack talked about. Matter of fact, let's talk about those first, since he just went through those. We did conduct those actual workshops, and when we put those on, we wanted to ensure that individuals were getting a comprehensive training relative to the subject, as well as the fact that they were able to get the cyber range. Along with those cyber ranges, when we were done with the actual training, we gave each individual at the end of that access to assessments, some additional videos, training scenarios where they could actually go through a full suite of training if they wanted to get their CEH or something of that nature, whatever they wanted to go through. We opened up the full suite of tools and made it available to them. It turned out to be, the first one went great. Second one went even better. We have another one that's scheduled for, I think it's Wednesday, the 27th or 28th of this month. And we're looking forward to putting those on, and we'll continue those as we move forward. So in regards to the tools themselves, you know, we started working with the city of Houston in 2014, and originally we started working through the idea that we were going to lay out and structure the NIST cybersecurity framework and put some processes and procedures together. And we started going through this, and then we realized that it might be in all of our best interests that we put something together that would allow us to be able to share this information. We could put it all together, and they could either be a bunch of documents, or we could put something together where we can share with different municipalities or other departments, or however we wanted to do it. So we decided that we would not only just package this up, but we would package it up and make it available on the internet to a set of organizations so that people would be able to use the data. One of the things that we found is that as we were going through the NIST framework, is that in some cases, smaller organizations that did not have a full cyber team, or did not even have cybersecurity people engaged, it would be in their best interest that we would put something together that they would be able to utilize and not have to just troll through huge documents. So we tried to put something together that would allow them to have a place where they can get policies and procedures. We would go through and we would put something together to help them get through the best practices. We put some tools in place, and that's where Jack's talking about the actual tools themselves. There's 4 of them. And then we help them walk through the roadmap and FAQs associated with the NIST framework. So the first thing that we put together was the CCI tool, which Jack alludes to, the Cybersecurity Control Implementation Interface. Is true, it's long, we just call it the CCI tool. Basically, it's a web-based utility that allows people to get tons of information. When you log into it, this is what you come up to. You guys can all get to it. It's www.cciitool.com or .info, take you to the same place. When you get there, this is the first thing you see. It gives you access to the specifics around, what is the NIST framework. There's documents you can download. We have policies and procedures out there. We have a walkthrough to outline and understand the NIST framework. If you go in and you actually register, you get access to more information, utilities, and things of that nature. One of the pieces that you go through is it will walk you through the framework core. And as you're going through the core, it also explains it to you in copious details. And then we have artifacts to go along with that. If you're logged in, you'll be able to download and get this information. Along those same lines, you can actually, we have this set up that you can actually go in. You can go in and get all the artifacts. You can get all the boilerplates, the processes, everything that we've put together there makes it available to you. We also have guidelines on implementation, as well as you can get a online interactive type spreadsheet thing that we have out there that allows you to assess yourself, your current profile, your target profile, and you can download the entire thing. If you notice on the far right-hand side, we talk about download the CCI tool. We turned that off. And we've done that on purpose because, as Jack stated, we are in the process of updating all the tools. And this is one of the areas that we'll be updating, taking it to a different framework. So you can download the documents, but we're not allowing individuals to download the actual tool right now because we're no longer updating this particular version of it. So the next piece of this is the cybersecurity mini assessment. You can access this from within the actual CCI tool. If you navigate over to utilities in the far left, you select utilities, then you'll be able to get to this. This is a mini assessment. Originally, we have a tool that's called the posture dashboard, which I'll talk about shortly. But in that particular tool, it is a very comprehensive assessment tool. In this particular case, this is something a little bit easier for people to navigate, and especially for some smaller organizations that really just want to understand and know where they want to start originally. So what this allows you to do is to go in and answer some questions and get some places where you might want to start for your assessment. You start the questionnaire, it goes through, it asks you some sticker questions around each one of the control areas. You answer those questions, you go through that process, and you can go through each one of them or not a lot of them. And it comes back and it gives you a report. It tells you specifically the critical areas that you may need to consider and gives you some input around what those areas are based on your responses to the questions. It also identifies things that are critical, high, moderate. And then it also puts together an executive summary. We have a scoring system behind this that basically, based on the questions that you've answered, we give you a score based on your responses. And so you are able to get this executive summary out. You can email the results to you. You can print the results, download them, view them, and that's what the mini assessment does. Jack talked a lot about the fact that we're upgrading these tools. This particular assessment is getting completely upgraded in the sense that we are now taking this from a generic type, not generic, but from the NIST, just from the NIST framework. We're now moving this over to where there will be many assessments based on the industry. So there may be questions in here that would be different of questions that we would ask from education, maybe is different than what we would ask very specifically related to, voting or something of that nature. So we're in the process of doing that now, literally in the process and redesigning, and you'll see a significant change in these particular tools. The next one that we have is the Cyber Disruption Readiness Tool. This one is undergoing a transition as well. We're dead in the middle of it, of the planning phase for this. And what this tool does is it goes through, and it's kind of like the mini assessment in that it actually questions about cyber disruption. What would happen if you lost power? What would happen if you lost the internet? What happens if you lose specific staff? It goes through, it asks you some very specific questions around your environment. What do you have? How do you respond? Can you do this? What would be the percentage of the impact to your organization if in fact you had these issues? And then it goes through, and sorry, I lost my keyboard here. Then it goes through and it puts together an assessment report as well. It outputs a report and gives you information about what you should or could do to mitigate your risk based on the responses that you put in place. And then it also has artifacts and things that you can download and use as you're going through this process. This particular tool, we can provide you a link to it, but we've taken it offline on purpose because we're updating it. So we'll put this back online. Everybody will be able to have access to this. And this you will also get from within the CCI tool itself. Last but not least is the posture dashboard. This is a very detailed, it's almost like a GRC tool in the sense that it allows you to do an assessment. You can do an assessment of your entire organization, or you can do specific areas. You go through, in this particular case, you have to request access to this tool because this is more of an application and it requires some training to go through to actually utilize it, but you can get to it and it takes you through a full assessment. You can answer the questions. It's based on the NIST cybersecurity framework. It asks you, it scores you, it provides you information. You can download artifacts just like the other tools, but they're a little bit more detailed and more comprehensive, as well as the fact that it actually has a very detailed scoring process and mechanism behind it as well. And it holds information in the sense that you're able to put a score in now, and then 6 months from now, you can make some changes and see where you've either increased or decreased in score. So with that, I think individuals asked for the actual link. I put the link up on the screen. I'll also put it into the actual chat area, but these are the actual tools that we have in place. And you'll see a significant transition and change as we move forward, enhance these, and put them a little bit more focused from an industry perspective. And I think that's it. Jack?
Hang on, I had to turn my mic off. I'll turn my mic back on. Thank you, Theresa. Let me check the chat. Thank you for sharing the link. Typically, I Google NIST framework need help. Believe it or not, that will point you there, because I've always asked people from other states, how did you find us? And they said, well, we had a mandate to do the NIST framework, and we typed in NIST framework help, and the CCI tool popped up. So that's one way to get it, but the actual link is available. Andreas, thank you for your comments. And yes, it's always great to have help. I will definitely reach out. Apparently, I started a meme that the weakest link is the person that clicks the link. I guess that's going to be the new cyber meme today. I don't see any other questions. Do you see any, Theresa? I think we're good.
I'm looking right now. I'm going to answer some of them.
Okay, perfect. And thank you, Theresa. And now I want to move into Greg. Greg works for Virtuo Group, and he's helping moving us into incident response. So he's actually going to take you on a journey through the ground floor of some of his incident response training that I think all of us can learn from. You're never too old to learn or too skilled to learn. So it's nice to have Greg. Greg, thank you for joining. And I turn it over to you.
Everyone is going to be involved. Theresa and I have put these together from the ground up, these workshops, in a manner that, as Jack mentioned, depending on who is going to be in these courses, in these classes, we want them to get as much as possible. So the first one here, normally these are much longer because of the time slot we have. This is going to be a condensed version, but we're going to give the bare bones basic introduction to cybersecurity and incident response management. So a little about me real quick. My name, again, I'm Greg Madden. I'm a CISSP, an Army veteran. I've been doing this IT for over 10 years, security for over 6 years. And I've been around IT and security in general for quite a while. And also Theresa is a military veteran as well. We're both disabled veterans. So Virtuo Group cares about that a little bit. So On the agenda for today, there's a few things we're going to talk about: the understanding cybersecurity incidents, meeting the challenge and responding to cybersecurity incidents, preparing for incidents, the key steps in responding, following up on a cyber incident, and finally conclusions and observations. So out the gate, understanding incidents. We're going to have to learn a little bit of terminology. So oftentimes you'll hear the words event or incident interchangeably. They're used interchangeably, but actually there are defined definitions. So an event is just something that happens, right? Anything, it doesn't mean it's malicious. It doesn't mean it's bad. They happen all day, every day. All right, a user logging in, a file being modified, privilege requests. These things happen a million times a day across the world, across the globe. Every organization that's capturing these logs has events. Now, when those events negatively impact an organization, that's when they become incidents. So on the screen here, you see a user login is a generic event. That happens every day. Every time one of your users logs in, it creates an event somewhere. Now, in the back end, let's say a user logs in from Russia. Now, foreign login for a user. Now that may become an incident. And that's how we characterize the difference between the two. All incidents are events, but not all events are incidents. And moving on, it's interesting to discuss how an attack phase plays out. There's three core phases of a cybersecurity incident. There's reconnaissance, attack, and the achieve objective, right? That's what they're trying to get to before. But it's interesting because on the countermeasure side of things, on the blue team, on the inside, we also have three core phases. And I'm going to go back and forth between these two slides to compare, but phase one is countermeasures for us. So we're going to be monitoring and logging. Phase one for us, we're trying to keep them out. So phase two for the attacker, they're exploiting vulnerabilities. They're trying to defeat any remaining controls. Phase two for the countermeasures is we're trying to build solid architectural system designs. We're trying to use standardized controls and including penetration testing. We're trying to test ourselves before the bad guys do get past our systems. And finally, phase three, this is where our incident response, business continuity, disaster recovery, and cybersecurity insurance fall. This is where phase three, for the attacker, they've achieved their objective. They've gotten in, they've disrupted systems, they're manipulating data, they're messing with things. And on the phase three, on the insider, that's when we're responding, that's when we're recovering, and that's when we are maybe utilizing cybersecurity insurance to maybe help recover from this a little bit. So those are the real core progressions of an attack. But now I'm going to discuss meeting the challenge, of responding to a cybersecurity incident. The main challenges that you're going to find, especially for some smaller organizations or organizations that might not have a defined cyber department, is just identifying a suspected cyber incident to begin with. If you don't have the proper channels in place to identify an incident, it can take months, years. I can't think of how many times I've heard of a breach that comes out and the company didn't find out they were even breached until 6 months later. And they say you might have gotten, I think, I recently heard about one that there was, my wife actually was buying pants or something, and they had breached the PayPal associated with that website. They didn't know about it. This happened back in March of this past year, but we just found out about it in the past week. So if you can't even identify the incident, you're going to be spinning your wheels and you're never going to know. The next challenge is establishing objectives. If you don't have people that know the ins and outs of cyber response, you can't properly wade through the investigation to understand what you should be looking up, how you should be responding. Analyzing the information that you have is something, again, we're going to talk about some of the shortcomings here in a minute, but unless you have trained personnel, they don't know what they're looking at, right? Also determining business impact. Again, if you don't have the people that know what they're doing, you don't have the technology, you may not even be able to tell how far something has spread into your network. And that's a major concern, especially with some organizations that don't have defined cyber departments. And finally, even identifying the systems, networks, and information that have been compromised. Let's say a single machine has been compromised, someone downloaded a virus. If you don't have the skills to check, you have no clue if that virus or that malware has jumped to a server or has propagated to another machine or throughout the network. You don't know that unless you have the proper channels in place. So the challenges I mentioned are the implications on people, process, technology, and information. People, obviously, is one of the more difficult parts. Organizations need a formal response team. They're called a Cybersecurity Incident Response Team, or a CSIRT. At the very least, though, you have to name an individual who's going to be responsible for this, right? We understand, everyone knows that unless you're a Fortune 500 company, you're probably not going to have a 20-man cyber team capable of responding to every incident. So at the very least, you have to designate someone who's going to be the go-to person, the go-to individual to manage your cyber response program, someone who's going to take charge and make sure that these things are planned out and working. And it's important that there's, they have some technical expertise, but can also make quick business decisions. So you don't only want to make the best IT guy the cyber manager, because I've known a lot of IT guys who could tell you anything in the world about computers, but can't communicate well. All right. The person that's going to be in this type of position needs to not only understand the technical aspect, maybe not technical experts to the extent of, they're not subject matter experts in everything, but they know how to navigate the technology. But they also need to be able to communicate effectively, because if people aren't, collaborating and getting to the root of the issue, you're going to have a problem. The next thing is the process, having these procedures in place. Organizations need these processes because incident response is a repeatable process, right? Every time you get a virus, you should be doing the exact same thing. You should have a step-by-step checklist of exactly how to respond, so that in the event of your untimely demise, the person next to you, the person below you can step up and begin doing the exact same thing, the step-by-step processes that you already have in place. It's not trained to you. We're not just training you to do the incident response. We're creating a process so that anyone can jump in and really take hold and work through that investigation. Next is technology. Obviously, this is one of the harder issues, because to get the best technology, the best log solutions, you got to chuck out some money. And it's not always the case. There are simple, open source solutions sometimes, but especially in government entities, you can't always use free and open source. And it's difficult to really gather all the logs you need to record all the appropriate events and identify all these incidents if you don't have the right technology gathering these logs and looking. All right, we can always try to identify it manually by going in, doing our quarterly audits or our annual audits, but that's not helping us if we can't see what's happening today, right now. Finally, information. There's a lot of information that comes into logs when you're gathering logs. And unless you're experienced in reviewing logs and managing and going through investigation, it's a lot of information. It's overload. The first investigation I was part of, I felt like I did not belong, because the information was above me. And after a few times of going through it and training and doing our annual training, I figured out a little more to how to understand some of the logs and push through it. But your CSIRT, your response team, has to be familiar with at least log analysis, so they can find the information they need. As we mentioned just a few minutes ago, the main problems, if you can't tell what systems were affected, that's information you need to know. Right? You need to know the IT infrastructure. You need to know the key suppliers. You need to know your critical apps. There's a lot of information that you have to know to have a successful response team and response effort. And we're going to get into some of that here in just a few. Well, right now, preparing for a cybersecurity incident. So the first thing we mentioned is the CSIRT. You're building your cybersecurity incident response team. Now, I said you're going to have someone with technical expertise and a good communicator, but you're not just throwing your IT department into your CSIRT. Right? You're going to include everything from legal experts, stakeholders. You will include some IT. You're going to include managers from all your departments. Anyone that has a stake in your organization, or anyone that is a manager that is responsible for critical assets or for critical processes, you're going to bring them into your team, because without their collaboration, you may miss critical assets. And in the event of an incident, you may not be able to respond appropriately. And so once you build your team, it's time to really identify what your critical functions are. And that's done via a criticality assessment. And essentially, this is just a way for everyone in the CSIRT and all your key stakeholders, department heads, managers, to sit down, identify all your critical assets, functions, systems, anything, whatever your organization cannot operate without, right? So think of a bank. A bank cannot operate without their ability to process loans or without their ability to process deposits and withdrawals, right? If you get rid of those three core services, a bank is essentially useless, right? You can't get your money out, you can't get money from them. What's the purpose? So a bank's not making money. So a bank is going to prioritize the criticality of those core servers over everything else, right? And after you identify those critical assets, then you're going to look at the support functions. So yeah, the core data server that houses a bank's data as far as balance inquiries and loan information, yeah, that's critical. But there's also an application that the tellers are going to use to reach out and touch that database to get that information. So while that individual database itself may not be critical, it is a critical support function, right? So every asset, every function, every system is going to be quantified based on the needs of the organization. So depending on what branch of government you're working in, depending on what department of your organization you're in, you're going to have different critical assets and different critical functions. And each department is going to quantify that criticality. And like I said, this requires input from every section, every department, because if you miss out or leave someone out, you're going to get to the point to where if you have an incident, you miss something, and you're not going to have a plan in place. And the final deliverable here is obviously a quantified list of assets that helps you determine where to focus your priorities and your resources. So after we develop a criticality assessment, now we've looked at what's most critical to us, then we're going to carry on a security threat analysis. Now this is kind of the opposite. Our criticality assessment is us looking at our internal and what's important to us. The security threat analysis is looking at how attackers are getting in. What's the most likely mechanism that a malicious actor is going to get into my organization? We're looking at the key dependencies of everything. You have to understand the nature of your business, because obviously the threats facing the Port of Houston are going to be way different than the mom and pop shop down the road, right? Completely different threats landscape. And you have to be aware of your threat landscape. And you have to take into account the assets that are likely to be targeted. So going back to the bank reference earlier, the core data server where everyone's deposit information, loan information is stored, that's something an attacker wants, right? But is that what they're going to attack first? Is that how they're going to get into your network, by attacking your core data server? No, that's not how they're going to get in. They're going to get in either via phishing. They're going to get in by maybe attacking a web server you have out in your DMZ. They're going to look at a different way. And so from a managerial standpoint, you not only have to look at what's critical to your organization, you have to look at what attackers can see, what the attackers are going to do. How are they going to get in? All right. So we're focusing our resources to not only our critical assets, but our most likely targets as well. So we can work together in that regard. And then we're going to also identify and recognize the compromise to what we call the CIA triad. All right. CIA stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Confidentiality means people that shouldn't see it, can't see it. Integrity means people that can't change it or shouldn't change it, can't change it. And availability means people that can get to it, should be able to get to it at the bare level. And so in incident response and cybersecurity, we talk about the CIA triad a lot. And that's just referring to confidentiality, integrity, and availability of our critical infrastructure. So once we have our team in place, we've quantified our assets, and we've looked at the threats facing our organization, then it's time to start engaging in scenario-based training, working through series of attack scenarios that are tuned to your organization, right? The specific vulnerabilities that you face. If you are a bank, you're not going to worry about a food vulnerability or someone getting food poisoning at your organization. That's not a likely scenario. But it is entirely likely that someone could hack your Wi-Fi. That's something to take into account. Now, these scenarios should be real world. And you can Google, you can get online, you can literally type in cybersecurity incident scenarios, and you put a list of 100, 200 different possible potential scenarios. But we've included a few here for you. Simulated malware infection on a core data server. So in this regard, you would sit down at the table, and it could all be completely tabletop exercises, or you can go full out and actually shut off servers and see how your team reacts. The incident response. At the end of every incident response plan, there should be a blurb that says, This is going to be updated quarterly, and those generic boilerplates that Theresa mentioned you can probably find on the CCII stuff. And you have to test. You have to include your tests in your incident response plan. What I've found working with organizations, if you don't make them write it down, they're not going to do it, right? Because they'll do it when I'm on site. If we come on site and we're working through IR, sure, they're going to do it and they're going to love it while I'm on there. But the minute I leave, or the minute my organization leaves and we just leave them to their own devices, if they haven't written it down in stone, next year or the next time something happens, they're not going to do it. That's just you. That's how we work. If it's not written down and defined, someone somewhere is going to forget. And that's the way humans work. And obviously you have to include the training in your incident response plan. How often are people trained? How often are the actual team members trained on their responsibilities? So building a real cybersecurity incident response capability includes these few steps here. Starting off, we're building our team. And we're going to conduct a criticality assessment, identify and analyze threats facing our organization specifically. Consider the implications on people, process, and technology. How is this going to affect everyone? If our core data servers go out, and we're probably going to be getting a lot of phone calls. How are we going to move our people around to answer those phone calls? We're going to create an appropriate control framework. We're going to make sure we're using the best recommended standards, best practices to test these things out. And we're going to create our response plan, right? Once we have that response plan in place, we're going to continuously test and review our state of readiness, right? Every quarter or maybe every year, we're going to be doing something to test this information out. All right, so the key steps, right? The key steps in responding to a cyber incident. Out the gate, we mentioned it from the very beginning, the hardest part is even detecting the incident. So there's many different ways you can do this. One of the first levels, once you have technology in place, is your alerts generated by your incident response, or your data loss, or your antivirus, or your log analysis system, your SIEM. Those alerts are going to go off and let you know when there's an event. But beyond that, you also have your front line, your employees, your users. If they click on something, they can tell you, hey, oops, I clicked on something. Maybe it hasn't ran yet. Maybe they downloaded it and it didn't actually run yet. Or maybe there's a pop-up on the screen. I can't tell you how many of those, you've been infected, call this number. I've seen in my lifetime. And users will call IT help desk and say, hey, I'm seeing this weird thing. What do I do? That's one of our first lines of defense. And finally, if you miss out if you don't have the technology in place and your people can't detect it, finally we have our quarterly or maybe annual audits. And a lot of the times, this is where you'll find breaches are reported. This is why they don't find the breach for 6 months, because they don't have the controls in place to find it on the spot. So when they go back through 6 months later, and maybe they're federal, they have a body there that's auditing them externally, they're going to say, hey, what's this? And I guess we were hacked. And that happens more often than you realize, that people that the hack doesn't happen. They don't realize they were breached until they're doing an audit, just because they don't have the controls and technology and processes in place. So one of the key steps is defining our objectives and investigating those objectives. And so as part of your incident response plan, the minute an incident occurs, these are some of the questions and statements you need to analyze for yourself. You need to identify what systems, what networks, what assets have been compromised out the gate. That's crucial. If you can't identify that information, you're not going to be able to move on. You have to determine what information has been disclosed, right? So if someone gets into your email, you need to know if they downloaded your inbox, right? If I just know someone's gotten into my Office 365, that tells me nothing, right? I don't know if they downloaded all my emails. I don't know if they were sending and forwarding emails. I have no clue what they did. I have to look deeper. We got to determine the potential business impact of the incident, right? How much is this going to affect us? How much is this going to cost us? We have to work out how it happened. How did the hacker get in? What's going on? How did they get in here? How did we let this happen? And finding out, performing the detailed analysis of the incident. So not only are we looking at what happened, and we're going to find out who did it and why, but we're going to see the exact everything they did from the minute they got into our organization, how they transferred through our network, and what they did to completely identify the entire incident in a single scope. And one of the first steps that's going to happen is triage. All right, so the first responder In this case, we'll just use an example. Someone calls into IT help desk that they got a weird pop-up on their screen. And help desk's job is to triage that, right? So if it's just a generic pop-up, you don't need to call the CEO or the president of the company every time someone gets a pop-up, right? That's a waste of everyone's time and resources. However, if your core data server is getting network pop-ups, you might want to be looking a little deeper, right? So these are things to take into account because we have to rapidly address and identify the incidents that are within the realm of our control and those that we cannot handle, right? Because there's going to be things, I consider myself a subject matter expert, but I don't know everything there is to know about cybersecurity. It's such a broad branch that, you know, there's no one person can be an expert. So if it's something that I'm not an expert at, I need to find someone that is to help me through this. So again, the first people are the incident response or the first responders. Many organizations don't have the right tools to conduct suitable investigations, right? So even if your first responder determines that, we need to look a little deeper into this. This isn't just a pop-up. We need to, you know, someone's been compromised. You need to quickly identify that scope if the severity is beyond your in-house skills, right? Because some of this stuff is confusing. I mean, I've talked with a lot of experts, and we're all confused sometimes. Some of this is very high-level attacks that we see. So it's critical that you already have something in place, a retainer or arrangements of some kind with maybe a third-party entity, a forensic investigator that can come in and go through this with you in the event that this is, you know, above your pay grade, as I like to say sometimes. If you don't know what you're doing, you're not going to be able to help your organization, right? Just because you can't help your organization directly doesn't mean you can't find someone that can help, right? And that's what we're talking about and having something in place, all right? When it comes to Office 365, if I told you right now an email, one of your users was hacked, would you be able to go in and find out whether or not someone took something from that email and downloaded something? That's difficult. You have to understand the way audit logs and everything work in Office 365. Whereas you could also just hire an Office 365 forensic specialist who can come in and tell you in 20 minutes, right? So sure, I may be able to figure it out. I can get on Google and I'll spend maybe 45 minutes to an hour learning it myself and going through. But in that extra 20 minutes, 25 minutes, that attacker has now moved on and started sending phishes from that email. They're targeting other, you know, accounts that they found within that email. And that's why it's crucial to respond quickly with the appropriate response. And that's what's the containment. Containment is crucial, right? The objective is to stop the attacker's access to your system, right? The containment itself isn't eradication. We'll talk about eradication in a second. Containing is just making sure this can't spread, right? So we've got a machine that's got a virus on it. All I care about is that this virus doesn't make it to any other machine on my network. No other servers. This virus is contained. And these are some of the ways you can do it. You can close ports, mail servers. You can change passwords. You can, you know, turn on some filtering on your firewall, isolate systems. Or sometimes it's as simple as unplugging it. You know, that's the first thing. If someone calls me and tells me, hey, I accidentally downloaded something that I shouldn't have, my first words are going to be unplug, right? Unplug the network cable. We'll go a little farther because you don't always want to unplug the computer power, for example, because there could be useful logs in there that you want to find, you know, use for your investigation. So actually, I'm just going to unplug the network cable, and now it cannot spread. So even if that virus is going through and it's ripping through this system, it can't send anything back to a CNC server. A hacker can't do anything with it because they can't get into it. It's not connected to the network. And now we have a standalone environment that we can research and find out what type of malware was used, how did they get access to this, when was it clicked, when did it happen, all the who, what, where, when, whys that go into this. And then after we've contained it, it's time to eradicate it. So using this single system example, we unplug the network cable, and now we're just going to re-image the laptop, right? We're going to re-image it. We're not going to put this back on there. We're going to completely eradicate anything that could possibly be on this machine by re-imaging it or getting a brand new machine in there. We're going to eliminate the key components of the incident, remove it from the network outright, and that includes things like deleting malware or disabling breached accounts or, you know, identifying and mitigating vulnerabilities that were exploited. And Another problem that a lot of organizations have is gathering and preserving evidence. As I mentioned, you shouldn't just unplug the power cable because there's useful logs, right? You need to be gathering information, not just hard drives and RAM, but you need to pull logs. You need to pull application data. You need to pull, browser history. If a user was going to a site they shouldn't have been before this, maybe that's a terms of service or a acceptable use violation, and you can fire them if they caused a breach that takes your entire network down because they wanted to go shoe shopping on work time. You can track this information back, right? And so gathering and preserving that evidence is crucial, not only for identifying the root cause, but in preserving evidence for an investigation going forward in case someone comes back to you and say, hey, why did this happen? I'm going to sue you, blah, blah, blah. Well, you can say, well, we crossed all our T's, we dotted all our I's, we have everything we need. And then you're going to recover, right? So once you've contained, eradicated, and then we recover. We're going to start restoring our systems to normal operation, all right? We're going to confirm things are functioning normally. This is the phase where we start moving everything back to how it was before the incident. And the main challenges here is confirming that it's been successful. All right, I can tell you how many organizations I've spoke with or worked with who they've gotten ransomware, they spin up a backup, they think they're fine, and then 5 seconds later, ransomware is spreading again, right? They thought they were good, but they weren't, because it turns out that ransomware got into their backup. So you have to actually assure that you're getting properly recovering as well. All right, finally following up on cyber incidents. So once you've gotten rid of the problem, you've recovered, now we're going to look deeper into the incident. We're going to investigate everything. We're going to find the root cause. We're going to find the problem, how they got in, and we're going to quantify the impact, right? How many dollars of damage was done to us? As far as, how are we going to have to offer credit monitoring? Are we going to have to do this? What are we going to have to do? And this is where you're going to identify all those endpoints that go into the final deliverable. And you're going to carry out this investigation to identify, you're going to want to find out who did it. Maybe you're not going to find out the person's name. At the very least, we're going to find some IPs. We're going to find some IOCs that determine where this came from so we can stop it from happening in the future. And we're going to report this incident. Now, depending on your organization and the type of data you have, you may have different reporting requirements. If you don't have any sensitive or personal data, you may not have to report to the state of Texas. But if you are storing social security numbers or credit card numbers, or if you have sensitive data on people of Texas, you may have a requirement to report to the state cybersecurity board, or at the very least your CEO. As I mentioned before, you don't have to report everything to your CEO, but there's going to be a threshold of some sort where you're going to have to report and let somebody know what's going on. You're going to want to get a full description of the incident. Exactly, you want to know what's happening completely, so that when you hand this report off, someone says, "Okay, gotcha. I know what's going on." All right, so as part of this post-investigation incident review, we're going to look at some of these questions that you need to ask your people when you're investigating. These are the things you're looking at. How do we deal with it? Was it adequate? Did we follow everything we were supposed to do? Were the procedures followed? How'd the plan work? Did the plan go out? Did everyone run around screaming, no one knew what to do? Or did they follow the procedures? How do we make it better? Could this have been prevented? So these are all the questions to take into account, and then more. Always ask questions. The only difference between an executive level employee and a regular employee is that executives ask more questions, and because they get to the root, and that's why they're executives. What lessons have we learned from this situation? And then we're going to update everything. All right. So once we go through, we're going to update everything: our controls, our auditing procedures, our incident management. We're going to update all that every time there's an incident. All right, so conclusions and observations. So just a quick overview of what we've talked about today. All incidents are events, but not all events are incidents. Remember that. There is a difference.
Greg, you got about a minute.
Gotcha. We're almost through here now. Preparation is the first step, right? You have to be prepared. If you don't have a plan in place, you're going to fail every time. You have to contain the incident. It can be as simple as unplugging a network, or as complicated as shutting down entire network segments. It's also crucial and critical to resolve root causes. Don't use Band-Aids. Band-Aids don't work. I've seen so many organizations use Band-Aids. I come in later and they've never replaced them. Always go for the root cause and don't use Band-Aids. And despite the current level of support, everyone's still facing these budget problems, technical skills, support, and influence. These are problems everyone faces. And finally, employing the services of properly qualified third-party experts can significantly help organizations handle security incidents in a more effective and appropriate way. So have someone you can go to that can help you in the event of a cybersecurity incident. Here's some references for you. We're running out of time here, so I can't spend too much here. But look up NIST for controls, find those props. You can look at the CIS top 20 for controls and the handbook for the CSERTs to identify how a team should be established. That's all I have. Again, this is a quick down and dirty review of cyber incident response. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer before we turn this back over to Jack.